You're in your kitchen. It's morning. You reach for that small sugar bowl, the one that has been sitting in the same spot for years. You've done it 1,000 times. A spoonful in your coffee, a little in your oatmeal, just a bit. And then maybe someone, a doctor, a friend, your daughter, says, you should probably switch to honey. It's more natural. It's better for you. So you do. You swap out the white sugar, you bring in the golden jar, and you feel good about it, like you made the right choice. But here's the question nobody really answers. Is honey actually better for your body after 60? Or is it just a prettier version of the same problem? Because here's what I found out, and it genuinely surprised me. The answer is not as simple as natural is always good. After 60, your body handles both of these things very differently than it did at 35. And knowing exactly what happens inside you when you consume each one could change the way you eat for the rest of your life. Stay with me. We're going to walk through this together slowly, and by the end, you'll know exactly where you stand. Before we compare sugar and honey, we need to talk about something most videos skip entirely. What actually changes in the body after 60 that makes this conversation matter so much? Around your 60s, three things start to shift in a way that directly affects how you process sweets. First, insulin sensitivity drops. That means your cells become slower at responding to insulin, which is the hormone that moves sugar out of your blood and into your cells for energy. Your pancreas still works, but the whole system is a bit less efficient. It has to work harder to do the same job. Second, your liver, which is responsible for processing fructose, a type of sugar found in both table sugar and honey, starts to process things a little more slowly. It's not broken, it's just not as fast. Third, inflammation, which is a natural part of aging, becomes much more sensitive to what you eat. Things that might not have caused any noticeable problem at 45 can now tip the scales toward joint pain, fatigue, or digestive discomfort. So when we talk about sugar and honey, we're not talking about them in a general sense. We're talking about how they behave inside a body that has changed. A body that is still capable of extraordinary health, but one that needs a little more awareness and a little more kindness. Let's start with white table sugar, because this is the one most of us grew up with, the one in every recipe, the one you probably still have in your cupboard. White sugar is what scientists call sucrose, a 50-50 combination of glucose and fructose. When you eat it, your digestive system breaks it apart almost instantly. The glucose rushes into your bloodstream, your blood sugar spikes, and your pancreas releases a wave of insulin to deal with it. At 35, your body handles this wave pretty smoothly, but after 60, that spike is sharper, the insulin response is slower, and blood sugar stays elevated a little longer. Over time, not overnight, but over months and years, this pattern is connected to increased risk of type 2 diabetes, weight gain, especially around the belly, higher triglycerides, and chronic low-grade inflammation. That inflammation is worth pausing on. You might know it as stiffness in the morning, or joints that ache more after a day of walking, or feeling mentally foggy after lunch. Sugar is one of the strongest dietary drivers of that kind of inflammation. Studies consistently show that high sugar intake in people over 60 is associated with accelerated cognitive decline, not just physical decline. And there's one more thing. Sugar has zero nutritional value, not a single vitamin, not a trace mineral, not any fiber. It is pure energy with nothing else attached. When you eat it, your body gets a quick burst of fuel, and then nothing. No satiety signals, no nutrients, and a blood sugar crash waiting about 90 minutes later. The effects of regular sugar consumption after 60 go beyond blood sugar. Let's look at three areas that matter enormously at this stage of life: your brain, your heart, and even your skin. The brain connection surprises a lot of people. Researchers have started calling Alzheimer's disease type 3 diabetes in some studies, not because it is literally diabetes, but because insulin resistance in the brain appears to be a major driver of cognitive decline. When your brain cells become resistant to insulin, they can't use glucose efficiently. They starve a little. And that slow starvation shows up as memory loss, brain fog, and eventually, in more serious cases, dementia. High sugar intake accelerates this process. The heart connection is more familiar. Sugar raises triglycerides, the fat particles in your blood. It lowers good HDL cholesterol. It contributes to higher blood pressure. And it promotes the kind of vascular inflammation that, over years, hardens arteries. After 60, when cardiovascular risk is already elevated, these are not small things. And then there's your skin. Sugar causes a process called glycation, where sugar molecules attach to proteins like collagen and elastin, making them stiff and less functional. The result? Deeper wrinkles, less skin elasticity, and a duller complexion. It's not vanity, it's biology. Your skin is telling you what's happening inside. None of this means you can never enjoy something sweet, but understanding these pathways helps you make choices with your eyes open. Not out of fear, but out of respect for this body that has carried you so far. Now let's open the honey jar. Honey is also primarily sugar, about 40% fructose and 30% glucose, with the remaining 30% being water and other compounds. So yes, it is still sugar in the chemical sense. But what makes honey genuinely different is everything else that comes along with it. Raw honey contains a remarkable collection of bioactive compounds, flavonoids, polyphenols, organic acids, enzymes, and over 180 different substances depending on what flowers the bees were visiting. These aren't trace amounts. They are biologically active components that do real things in your body. Chief among them is its anti-inflammatory effect. Multiple clinical studies have found that regular moderate consumption of raw honey reduces certain inflammatory markers in the blood, the same markers that drive the joint pain, the fatigue, and the cognitive decline we just talked about. It doesn't eliminate inflammation, but it actively works against it rather than feeding it. Honey also has a lower glycemic index than white sugar, meaning it causes a slower, more gradual rise in blood sugar. For people managing insulin sensitivity after 60, this difference matters. It's not dramatic. Honey is still sweet and still raises blood sugar, but the curve is smoother, less spike, less crash, easier on the pancreas. And unlike sugar, honey actually brings something nutritional to the table. Small amounts of vitamins B2, B3, B5, and B6. Calcium, potassium, magnesium, zinc. Enzymes that support digestion. Prebiotics that feed the good bacteria in your gut. Here's something that not enough people talk about. After 60, your gut microbiome, the trillions of bacteria that live in your digestive tract, changes significantly. The diversity of bacterial species tends to decrease. The beneficial strains that protect your gut lining, support your immune system, and help regulate your mood become less dominant. This shift is connected to everything from increased digestive discomfort to higher rates of infection to even depression. Raw honey is one of the few sweet foods that actually supports your gut microbiome rather than damaging it. It contains oligosaccharides, a type of prebiotic fiber that feeds beneficial bacteria like lactobacillus and bifidobacterium. These are the strains associated with better digestion, stronger immunity, and lower inflammation. Honey also contains hydrogen peroxide and beta-fensin 1, compounds with natural antimicrobial properties. In the gut, this means honey can gently suppress harmful bacteria without wiping out the good ones, something antibiotics notoriously struggle with. For people who deal with occasional digestive upset, bloating, or irregularity, which becomes more common after 60, a teaspoon of raw honey in warm water in the morning can be genuinely therapeutic. Not a miracle, but a quiet, consistent support. And there's the immune connection. About 70% of your immune system lives in or around your gut. A healthier gut microbiome means a more responsive, more balanced immune system. Honey's antioxidants, including pinosembrin and chrysin, have been shown to reduce oxidative stress, which is one of the key drivers of immune aging. Let me put these two side by side for you, clearly and directly, so you can see exactly what we're working with. Glycemic index. White sugar has a glycemic index of around 65. Raw honey sits between 45 and 55, depending on the variety. That means honey raises your blood sugar more slowly and more gently. For someone managing prediabetes or simply trying to protect their insulin sensitivity after 60, this difference adds up over months. Nutritional value. White sugar has none. Honey has antioxidants, trace minerals, enzymes, and prebiotics. It's not a multivitamin, but it's not empty either. Effect on inflammation. Sugar is pro-inflammatory. Honey is anti-inflammatory when consumed in moderation. This is perhaps the most significant difference for people in their 60s and beyond. Effect on the gut. Sugar feeds harmful bacteria and contributes to gut dysbiosis. Honey nourishes beneficial bacteria. Again, opposite directions. Calories. Per teaspoon, honey has slightly more calories than sugar, about 21 versus 16. But because honey is denser and sweeter, most people naturally use less of it. So in practice, the daily calorie difference is often zero or even in honey's favor. Antimicrobial properties. Sugar has none. Honey has several well-documented ones. Raw honey applied to wounds heals them. This is not folk medicine. It's backed by clinical research, including its use in medical-grade Manuka honey treatments. So on nearly every measure that matters after 60, honey wins. But there is one important caveat, and I'm not going to gloss over it. Here it is. Honey is still sugar, and after 60, all concentrated sources of sugar, even the natural, beautiful, bee-made kind, need to be consumed with awareness. If you have type 2 diabetes, prediabetes, or metabolic syndrome, honey is not a free pass. It is better than white sugar, yes, but it still raises blood sugar. A tablespoon of honey contains about 17 grams of carbohydrates. For someone on insulin or with poorly managed blood glucose, that matters enormously. Always talk with your doctor before making changes if any of these conditions apply to you. Also, not all honey is equal. The honey that comes in a little bear-shaped plastic bottle and has been sitting on a supermarket shelf for 2 years is not the same as raw, unfiltered honey from a local beekeeper. Commercial honey is often heated, filtered, and diluted, processes that destroy most of the enzymes, antioxidants, and probiotics that make it beneficial in the first place. You may essentially be eating flavored sugar syrup. Raw honey is what the research is actually about. Look for that word on the label. And the amount matters. The studies showing honey's benefits generally use 1 to 2 tablespoons per day, not a half cup drizzled on everything. More is not better. At large amounts, even honey tips into inflammation-promoting territory. The dose makes the difference. So the message is not eat honey freely. The message is honey used thoughtfully in its raw form, in moderate amounts, is a genuinely better choice than white sugar for most people over 60. And that matters. So now that you know all of this, what do you actually do with it in your day-to-day life? Let me walk you through some practical ways to make this shift without overhauling everything at once. Start with your morning drink. If you take sugar in your coffee or tea, try reducing it gradually over 2 weeks. Then experiment with a small drizzle of raw honey. You might be surprised. Honey has a more complex flavor, and over time, many people find they enjoy it more. Begin with half a teaspoon and see how your taste adjusts. In cooking and baking, honey can replace sugar at a ratio of roughly 3/4 of a cup of honey for every cup of sugar. Because honey is liquid, reduce other liquids in the recipe slightly and lower your oven temperature by about 25 degrees, since honey browns faster. It's a small adjustment, not a big one. For that afternoon craving, the one that hits around 3 in the afternoon when you want something sweet, try a small piece of fruit with a tiny drizzle of honey instead of a biscuit or candy. You get the sweetness plus fiber plus nutrients. Your blood sugar responds much more gently. And here is something worth knowing. The more you reduce your overall sugar intake, the more your taste buds recalibrate. After about 3 weeks of lower sugar consumption, foods that used to seem just normal start tasting intensely sweet. This happens because your taste receptors become more sensitive again. Many people report that after this recalibration, they genuinely enjoy sweetness more, not less, because they're actually tasting it. I want to step back from the science for a moment, because this conversation isn't just about sugar and honey. It's about something bigger. After 60, many of us start paying attention to our bodies in a way we maybe didn't before. A diagnosis, a friend's health scare, a morning where getting out of bed felt harder than it should. Something shifts. Suddenly, the choices that used to seem small, the sugar in the coffee, the dessert after dinner, the afternoon snack, start to feel more significant. And I want to say something gently but clearly, that attention is a gift, not a burden, not a sentence. A gift. Because when we start paying attention, we start having choices that we didn't know we had. The years after 60 can be some of the most vital, joyful, and deeply satisfying years of a life. Research on longevity and quality of life consistently shows that people who remain curious, who make thoughtful choices about their health, and who stay connected to community, to purpose, to the simple pleasures of daily life, not only live longer, they live better. A small jar of raw honey on your kitchen table is not magic, but what it represents, the willingness to make a kinder choice for your body, to swap something that harms for something that helps, to pay gentle attention, that matters. Not because you're afraid of getting older, but because you respect the life you're still living. Since we've established that raw honey is the good stuff, let's spend a moment on which types are worth knowing about. Manuka honey from New Zealand is the one you've probably heard the most about. It has the highest concentration of methylglycol, a compound with exceptionally strong antimicrobial properties. It's the most studied, the most potent medicinally, and also the most expensive. For everyday use, it may be more than necessary, but for wound care, immune support during illness, or gut repair, it has genuine clinical backing. Buckwheat honey is darker, stronger in flavor, and contains more antioxidants than most other varieties, even more than some superfoods. Studies have shown it to be particularly effective at reducing oxidative stress. It's not as sweet as lighter honeys, which actually makes it easier to use in smaller amounts. If you can find it at a farmer's market, it's worth trying. Wildflower honey is the most common raw option. Its health profile depends on the flowers in the region, but in general, raw wildflower honey contains a broad spectrum of polyphenols and is far superior to processed commercial honey. This is usually the most accessible and affordable raw option. What you're looking for on any label: the word raw and ideally unfiltered or unheated. If it says pure honey or natural honey, Without those other words, it has likely been processed. If it's clear as water and never crystallizes, it's been heat filtered, and most of the good stuff is gone. Real raw honey clouds up and crystallizes over time. That's not a flaw. That's a sign of quality. While we're on the topic, let's quickly mention a few other natural sweeteners that come up often when people are moving away from white sugar. Maple syrup is a solid option. It contains zinc, manganese, and a range of antioxidants. Its glycemic index is around 54, similar to honey. It's not as nutritionally rich as raw honey, but it's far better than white sugar and adds a beautiful flavor to oatmeal, baked goods, or a drizzle on plain yogurt. Dates and date paste deserve mention. A whole medjool date gives you natural sugar alongside fiber, potassium, magnesium, and polyphenols. Because of the fiber, the blood sugar response is surprisingly gentle, and dates have been shown in studies to support cardiovascular health, specifically in older adults. If you can blend a few dates into a paste and use that to sweeten things, you're doing very well. What about stevia? Stevia is a plant-based non-caloric sweetener that does not raise blood sugar at all. It's safe, well-studied, and actually has some research suggesting mild blood pressure benefits. Some people find the aftertaste strong. That's a personal preference. But if you can enjoy it, it's a perfectly valid option. Artificial sweeteners like aspartame or sucralose, however, are worth avoiding after 60. Recent research has raised real concerns about their effects on the gut microbiome, and some studies have linked long-term use to increased cardiovascular risk. They're not the safe option they were once marketed as. If you want sweetness without calories, stevia is the better path. Let me tell you what people consistently report when they reduce sugar and switch to moderate honey use. Not what the studies say, though those matter, but what people in their 60s and 70s actually notice in their bodies and their daily lives. The first thing most people notice, usually within the first 2 to 3 weeks, is a change in their energy patterns. The afternoon energy crash, that heavy, foggy feeling that hits around 2 or 3 in the afternoon, starts to soften. Many people who thought that was just getting older are surprised to find it was largely diet-related. When blood sugar stops spiking and crashing, energy becomes more even, more sustained throughout the day. The second common report is a change in joint discomfort. This one surprises people most. Many people in their 60s deal with morning stiffness or achy joints and attribute it entirely to arthritis or aging. While those factors are real, chronic dietary inflammation plays a significant role that's often underestimated. Reducing sugar and adding raw honey's anti-inflammatory compounds can produce measurable relief over 6 to 8 weeks. Not a cure, but a real noticeable difference. Sleep quality is a third area people often mention. High sugar intake disrupts sleep architecture, particularly deep sleep in the restorative stages. People who reduce sugar often report falling asleep more easily, sleeping more deeply, and waking feeling more rested. This is one of the less obvious connections, but one of the most impactful. And then there's what people describe as a kind of mental clarity. Less fog, more presence, a feeling of being more connected to themselves throughout the day. These changes are real and they're measurable in research, but they're also deeply personal. And for many people, that personal felt experience is what makes the change feel worth keeping. We've covered a lot of ground together. Sugar versus honey, inflammation, blood sugar, the gut, the brain, the heart. What to look for in a label. What other people have noticed when they made the switch. But I want to close with something simple, because the truth here is actually simple. Your body is not the same as it was 20 years ago. And that's not a sad thing. That's just an honest thing. The changes that come with age are not only losses. There's also a kind of clarity that arrives, a knowing of yourself, a patience with yourself, a willingness to finally listen to your body rather than push past it. What you eat is one of the most direct conversations you can have with your body. Every meal is a message, and you don't have to be perfect. Perfection is not the goal, and it's not realistic. But small, consistent shifts compound over time in ways that matter deeply. Replacing white sugar with raw honey in moderate amounts is one of those shifts. It won't transform your health overnight, but over weeks and months, you see it contributes to lower inflammation, a healthier gut, more stable blood sugar, and a body that feels quietly, steadily, a little better. That golden jar on your kitchen table, it's a small thing, but small things done with intention add up to a life. If this video gave you something useful, please share it with someone you care about. And if there's a health question you'd like us to explore next, leave it in the comments below. We read every single one. Take care of yourself. You're worth the effort.